Bobby Lashley's entry to pro wrestling was similar to many that preceded him, a star wrestler encouraging them to get into it. Lashley was already athletic and had a very strong mentality stemming from his time in the US Army. Most importantly was Lashley's talent of being an amateur wrestler. It's unknown what would have been of Lashley's US Olympic run in 2004 had he never suffered a knee injury during a bank robbery, but things were looking positive had it not been the case. Kurt Angle suggested he enter the world of professional wrestling, which was very convincing. He comes in, WWE assigns him to OVW, where he's constantly hidden by Jim Cornette, who was peeing his pants at the thought of him being called up so soon, and this was when WWE just brought in any muscular guy. It wasn't a strong strategy, but as green as Lashley was, Vince McMahon did discover him and immediately strapped the rocket on him. Lashley was a very strong part of SmackDown and was pushed as the next big star, but ultimately things did work as McMahon intended. However, a damaged rotator cuff spelled the end of his WWE career. It's not very black and white as I made it out to be. Lashley reportedly had huge problems in the back with Michael Hayes. Crystal wasn't being treated well by the company, and a rumor of his WrestleMania 23 payout being $250,000 are considered reasons why he left in early 2008. These rumors aren't very clear, and it's very blurry because nobody, including Lashley, went into great detail about his departure except the time he mentioned he wanted to broaden his horizons and test himself. He went into MMA and even had a short, albeit strange run in TNA with his wife managing him. Unlike Batista, who struggled in his early days away from WWE, it was the entire opposite with Lashley. He always found ways to succeed and keep himself busy with MMA. Sometime later, he returns to TNA and finds even more success winning every singles belt. It deserves a video on its own because Impact really knew what they had, a legitimate athlete that had size, speed, and intensity. In addition, wrestling for Impact gave Lashley even more experience to develop better in ring. His time in WWE to his time in Impact in ring is night and day. It was a tremendous improvement. There wasn't much talk about a potential return to WWE, although Lashley had improved his skill set all around, and adding a Bobby Lashley to an already stacked roster would have benefited WWE greatly because there was a lack of fresh big guys that could be around. Rumors circulated of a return around December of 2017 with Lashley's contract expiring. It was a foregone conclusion because he accomplished everything there was in TNA. He took out the likes of Kurt Angle, Drew Galloway, and the most ironic part in all of this was that these guys joined WWE around the same time period. On the April 9, 2018 episode of Raw, the night after WrestleMania 34, Bobby Lashley made his return. Elias was performing some trashy ass song and he put a stop to this. The fans were excited to see him back, but Elias was full of jealousy. He dropped him and stood tall as the newest member of the Raw roster. His first match back was the following week in a 10-man tag team match. He didn't really have much of a storyline at this point. If you had the knowledge back then, I'm sure we would have preferred it was kept that way because the first storyline he had was terrible. He was facing Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in tag team action, but there was plans in motion for Lashley following Backlash though. He had video packages played in an interview with Renee Young to explain why he went away for 10 years and what drove him to return. He spoke fondly about his sisters and oh man, not because of the interview itself, but because of what followed. Talking about sisters has never gotten so much attention from somebody. Like, look at this man, he was frosting at the mouth to talk about it. The rivalry between himself and Lashley was slowly heating because Sami Zayn felt that he was a victim of a conspiracy. He decided to randomly mention Bobby Lashley in his return. Zayn whined about the time he was being lifted for a long time, and he claimed to contract vertigo from the situation. That's why he couldn't compete in the Greatest Royal Rumble, and that's why he lost every single match since then. Zayn claimed Lashley was trying to be like him. Why would he wear my hat? Oh, look at him, he's copying me. So he went to Facebook and found the 3 Lashley sisters. Turns out everything he said is a lie. Side note, I forgot how annoying and obnoxious his version of Sami Zayn was. I was laughing the entire time because of how goofy and how cartoonish he was. He said that his sisters are coming to Raw next week. Zayn dropped them later that night to cost him a spot in the Money in the Bank ladder match, but about the sisters, well, they spoke bad about Lashley and how he used to beat them up. Platinum was holding a helmet, and Lashley was portrayed as a selfish person. So in essence, what he was talking about earlier was nothing more than a psyop. It was a lie. Everything Bobby Lashley's like, oh, my sisters, they love me. The segment was very dry, the crowd didn't really care, and he didn't want to hear more of this, but instead of coming out all angry, it was the entire opposite. Bobby Lashley was thankful of Sami Zayn and said he couldn't have been a better friend. The man was fuming and he told him that his family thinks he's garbage. By this point, he realized that he made a mistake. And his sisters attack. Lashley stripped them and embarrassed them right out of the ring, and it was a bad segment. The whole idea of claiming Lashley was a fraud should have been entirely different. It was a dumb idea to actually bring his sisters out because it was never going to be good. It didn't hurt Lashley. He wasn't taking Sami Zayn serious, but all around it was bad. With that said, Sami Zayn knew what he did was stupid and was going to issue an apology. He made mention of fans on the internet trashing it, and it was going to be tough for him to muster up the words to say sorry, but he finally did it. But despite this, he said that everything that was said last week was true. His expose on Bobby Lashley was rooted on reality. Yes, the sisters were actors, but it's based on true events. Sami Zayn wanted sympathy. Lashley interrupted and said that last week was funny, but it gets old real fast. So he challenged him to a match at Money in the Bank. Zayn accepted and said he's gonna haluva kick that smile at the pay-per-view. So he got bullied by Lashley, who apologized for everything he was gonna do at Money in the Bank. From here, Zayn made sure to avoid Lashley over fears of taking a beating and suffering an injury before the show. He mocked Lashley's Instagram posts and how they're so inspirational, even asked questions about whether Lashley actually had sisters or was in the army. Now you guys know, the moment you mention the army in wrestling, it's over. Talk about his promo skills, his sisters, but USA is where he draws the line. Zayn even tested out Lashley's athleticism in a competition, but used it as a way to attack and finally hit the haluva kick. Very rough build. As I said, the sister story was bad. What made it so bad was that they had a lack of self-awareness. They didn't realize, hey, this is terrible. It's not even interesting. The fans weren't booing Sami Zayn. They just did not give a damn about it. Alright, with that said, their match at Money in the Bank was very forgettable. Sami Zayn got his ass beat in 6 minutes. He had some offense in, but it was all Lashley, and the feud was over. Which was a good thing, because the best part about this feud was the fact that it was over. It wasn't helping either man. Sami Zayn looked like a goof. Not because he got beat up by Lashley, but because of the whole sister thing. And it's a storyline that many of us choose to forget because of how bad it was. Alright, with this feud with Sami Zayn being over, Lashley set his sights towards the Universal Championship. It was a natural change because the one match fans were clamoring for at the time was Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley. This was the biggest match that Bobby Lashley could have had at the time because it's a dream match. Roman Reigns felt that he was the uncrowned champion, but Lashley disagreed. Kurt Angle knew where this was headed and said that both are gonna face each other in a multi-man match with the winner challenging the Universal Champion. That never came to fruition. Instead, both men faced off at Extreme Rules. In the build-up, both men were trying to top one another and poor Revival were getting decimated. If only Dash Wilder had his gun. Roman went off on Lashley saying he delusionally thinks he's the guy. He couldn't handle it 10 years ago and times are different now because he runs this yard. It was a very tense situation between the two. Reigns was constantly calling him Bob, trying to undermine him and called him out for a fight. Lashley was like, no problem, and Kurt Angle had to bring out half of the roster to separate them. Way better than the Sami Zayn story. This didn't need much to it. All they had was a simple problem with each other. Nothing complex like involving sisters. It was all about championship gold. You don't need some special story. They're two powerhouses who crave beating others up. Now, their match at Extreme Rules falls a bit short of expectations, just a bit short, because I think one of the reasons that was the case was because Lashley had just came in, and if done in 2019, I'm sure it would have been better. It's good though. Do not think I'm saying this is a bad match, because it is far from that. It's actually a good match. They actually booked Bobby Lashley to beat Roman Reigns clean. And it's one of the biggest results in this era of WWE, not because Lashley wasn't good enough, it's the fact that 2018 Roman Reigns was on the other side of the ring. This man was almost unbeaten clean barring Brock Lesnar during this era. In Lashley's case, he needs this victory. It's not as if he was craving it and he died without it, but because he had just returned and was out of the public eye for 10 years, he needed to give the fans a refresher on who he was. Lashley then won the right to face Roman Reigns again, but this time it was for the opportunity to challenge Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam for the title. Extreme Rules was a pretty intentional way to do things because the rematch was way more important. This is the Triple H tactic that WWE did here, where he wins first, but then the next time his rival wins, the stakes are lower. Except this time around, it's the opposite. Roman won this match to go to SummerSlam, which again, I thought it was a missed opportunity. They had a fresh match. It was huge. It would have been intense, but they preferred the Roman and Brock match, which had been constantly rejected. This was the super crowd era where they took over the shows, and the sentiment you've seen online was always fouled to the arena. It's not the same nowadays, but 2018 was a prime example of what I'm talking about. Personally speaking, an encore of SummerSlam 2017 with Brock, Bobby, Roman, and maybe Strowman, who was Mr. Money in the Bank, I should mention, but they had other plans. As for Lashley, he was left off the SummerSlam card, which would be a bad thing, but 2018 WWE is a year where you're better off being away from the card because he would have faced somebody in a heatless feud like Baron Corbin. Bobby Lashley was given a hype man by the name of Leo Rush. Rush had some success in 205 Live, but he was clearly limited on the main roster due to his size. On one night, Rush was handed a microphone during Lashley's match with Kevin Owens. He's giving him advice, hyping him out, and constantly shouting, Lashley, Lashley, and slowly the boos are growing louder. Owens was already being cheered here in Chicago, and the roles were already reversed in the beginning. KO was more open and courageous. It was such a random decision, but by the end of it, Bobby Lashley, for the first time in his WWE career, was a heel. This led to him being called the Almighty, but for the time being, at the request of Leo Rush, he added insult to injury to that already injured knee to take out Kevin Owens. The heel turn was well done. The pairing with Leo Rush was perfect because he added flashiness and most importantly words, which were two things Lashley lacked. Raw had a heel problem at this point. There was a great opening because at the time it was only McIntyre, Corbin, and Ziggler, so he should slot in quickly. His booking was a bit rocky during the early parts of his heel turn, and they knew they wanted to make him a heel, but other than that, Rush and Lashley got involved with Elias. Things got heated between both sides. Elias was breaking guitars on Rush, and this led to a ladder match with the guitar hanging up high on the pre-show of TLC. Elias won it, which is strange to say, but Lashley had the last laugh, and it sounds weird saying this, but they actually had high hopes for Elias. They're not higher than RVD, but this man was considered for a match with John Cena at 3 consecutive WrestleManias, 34, 35, and 36. Like, damn, that's crazy. He even won this feud. But things got a bit better for the proclaimed Almighty. While Dean Ambrose was cosplaying as a random citizen from 2020 with the gas mask and the medical masks, he was also the Intercontinental Champion. Lashley received his opportunity to challenge for the title with Seth Rollins on the January 14th, 2019 episode of Raw. I'm assuming they knew Ambrose was leaving here because in a surprise turn of events, Bobby Lashley was the Intercontinental Champion for the first time in his career. I always associated Lashley with the US title, so seeing him win this belt is kind of strange. Of course, that sentiment wears down as time goes on. Oh yeah, this segment had the internet in a chokehold. In light of his superb performance against Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble, Finn Balor addressed the crowd the next night on Raw. The Prince expressed disappointment over being bested, but his attention was deviated to Bobby Lashley, who interrupted. Lio Rush said it was a disgrace somebody like Balor even got an opportunity, and even though he had a chance with Brock Lesnar, that wouldn't be the case with Bobby Lashley. Lio Rush expressed great confidence over a potential match, but all Balor had to do was mention 12 seconds. Bobby Lashley's time in the Royal Rumble was about as long as Finn Balor's main event push in 2016. For somebody that was the Intercontinental Champion and as successful as Lashley, it was ridiculous. So back to the topic at hand. He attacked Balor and repeatedly slammed him on the mat. Finn Balor was bruised and battered stemming from that title match, but these injuries were anything but alleviated. Even then, he refused to stay away. Lashley though felt that Balor wasn't deserving of being in the ring with him, so he faced Lio Rush. The Prince made work on Rush to set up a clash with the champion at Elimination Chamber, except it was going to be a handicap match. At this point, I guess WWE thought, hey, that Finn Balor kid hasn't won a title in eons or something, because he overcame both men to become champion, and unlike last time, shoulder injury wasn't going to derail his run. Rush took the pinfall this time around, and Lashley continued stalking Finn Balor, but also had an issue with Braun Strowman on the side. Lio Rush was making mistake after mistake, losing to Finn Balor, and was starting to anger his guy. And then there was this trio of doom. Each guy was better off alone and suffered a stats D-boost being with each other. Their main goal was to take out the Shield and spoil the party of Seth Rollins, who was on a collision course with Brock Lesnar. The match at Fastlane was pretty damn good. It brought closure to the Shield story with Dean Ambrose leaving, and yet another memorable match to the legacy of the Shield. A reunion seemed almost impossible a month earlier due to many reasons. As for Lashley, he quickly bounced back with a title match against Balor. With the help of Lio Rush, who came in clutch, Bobby Lashley once again became the Intercontinental Champion. He's all shocked like he beat somebody huge, like bro beat 2019 Finn Balor. But his relationship with the hype man was fixed. The former champion was persistent on recapturing the gold, but had to beat Lashley and Jinder Mahal to get the opportunity. Rush wasn't medically cleared to compete, and suddenly Finn Balor started wrestling like it was 2016 again and easily overcame them to go to WrestleMania. He probably realized afterwards, damn, this isn't sustainable. Time to bring out the Demon. Now, WWE were using the Demon as a super attraction at the time. It kind of hindered Balor because it was a situation where anytime he came out, you were waiting for the Demon. The Intercontinental Champion was extremely upset at this situation, and when asked if they were upset about WrestleMania, Lio Rush undermined Balor's abilities and said Lashley doesn't have to deal with dead weight like Jinder Mahal. Bobby Lashley said Balor and the Demon are one and the same, and every single time he whoops him. The Prince popped up on the screen and said that he's had demons, and his demon will be Lashley's nightmare. Bro should have done this at the Royal Rumble. He wouldn't be standing here if that was the case. Now you guys know how this ends. What's strange is that this was the first time the Demon appeared at WrestleMania. You'd almost think they'd have him at WrestleMania 34 because it was a big event, but looking back, it just didn't make sense for him to come out. This was one of the craziest squashes in recent years. Lashley wasn't close to his true dominant self, but with hindsight, wow. Lio Rush looked like a little kid pissing his pants in fear of the Demon, and the champion had his moments, but this was entirely Finn Balor's match. Bobby, as good as he looked, was basically facing somebody from another dimension. This man was hitting power bombs on a powerhouse. How was he going to compete with that? And Balor was the Intercontinental Champion again. Following WrestleMania, Bobby Lashley was one of those mid-carders who were around but doing nothing. Lio Rush went away from WWE due to a strange incident where he was described as difficult. Apparently he was asked to handle. Lashley was left without a story. That is until he entered a feud with Braun Strowman. Both men had a point to prove, and it was very similar to the Roman Reigns feud. He was decimated in an arm wrestling contest, so he blinded and obliterated him. This segment has 154 million views on YouTube. That's how crazy it was. Their match was just there at Super Showdown, but it would only get better. Strowman scored the victory here, and Lashley got more aggressive. He was choking him with a rope, throwing him into barricades, This led to a no disqualification match. Their no disqualification match did nothing but harm as Strowman launched Lashley through the stage. It was a huge moment at the time because it felt like Paul Heyman's Raw was going to take a different direction compared to what had been seen at the time. Since he was so brutalized, Rey Mysterio of all people had to pay the price and endure the wrath of Bobby Lashley. Notorious Rey. This man even obliterated the referees. Unfortunately for him, this didn't translate to the last man standing match at Extreme Rules. Well, it actually did, but it didn't result in victory. Fun match though, this was far and away their very best one. Unfortunately, Bobby Lashley suffered an elbow injury. It wasn't exactly a blessing in disguise because when he returned, he was in a storyline with Lana. That's not the bad part. The problem with this story was the fact that Rusev was being cucked. It's a strange story, I almost included it here, but video scheduling's too complicated. So either I make a Rusev WWE run video or include this as a prelude to the Hurt Business story. Alright, with that said, Bobby Lashley's return here was very, mistreated, I'd say. The problem is, even though he was the Intercontinental Champion and he was on Raw every week, he didn't feel like he was at his full potential. He just wasn't utilized as well as he should have been. We say that a million times. We say that about just about every wrestler on the roster, not named Roman Reigns. But Lashley had the look they wanted. He was a powerhouse. He got better in ring. It's just strange how they never decided, hey, let's push him. Bobby Lashley was a hidden main eventer in plain sight, basically. They just didn't put in effort to build him up into becoming one. Alright, what you guys think of Bobby Lashley's return? Please comment down below, and that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the Hurt lock of the like button and perhaps the spear on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.